Alright, so we're into episode 7 of Sonic Heroes, entering the Frog Forest. And just to give you a slight heads up, we'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of Frog Forest, which is sort of a neat little forest level. The music is calmer. It's not supposed to be as stressful as some of the other levels. It doesn't mean there's still not crazy stuff going on. But the main new mechanic here that's been added, although there are some secondary things that you see for the first time here, the main new mechanic in this game, or this level, is this frog right here. These oversized frogs can call for rain. In fact, they're probably the whole reason the forest exists here in the first place, since we just came out of Rail Canyon, which was a desert, and as far as I can tell, the latitude didn't change. I don't think our altitude changed much either, because you can see how tall some of these things are. So I'm thinking this is all a frog-generated kind of thing. Now, when we left the story last time, we had just been introduced to the storyline of this game. We had the whole, Rouge wants treasure, Shadow wants answers, Omega wants revenge business. And really, for a Sonic game, you don't need an incredible amount of plot. But now we've learned who the real baddie is. It's not Eggman who's been leading us on this merry chase. It is Metal Sonic. And Metal Sonic, as you can see, was interested in one thing in particular from Team Dark, and that is the peculiar characteristics of Shadow the Hedgehog. His ability to use Chaos Control and some of these other and some of his other special abilities that Metal Sonic wanted to adapt to his own use, and we'll see those before this game is over. But it also brings up an interesting point. And that point is interesting enough that I'm going to leave it for a minute, and I want to just get rid of something else first. The other thing that we were introduced to in that cutscene was the idea that Dr. Eggman has been creating these Shadow robots based off of Shadow's design. We'll see these things in Shadow the Hedgehog, and they're not particularly... there's nothing particularly shadowy about them. They look like Shadow, and usually they're armed with like rocket cannon arms or things like that nature. But this is part of the plot suggests that perhaps Shadow, the character we've been following around here in our group, the character you think was from Sonic Adventure 2, is perhaps only an android. And fortunately or unfortunately, Sonic Heroes does a couple things to sort of wreck this plot. First off, you saw the Shadow android shattered in that cutscene, and he had wires and stuff. Our Shadow that we're playing with should very easily be able to know whether or not he's made of wires. Okay. Mini mechanic, these little pedal helicopters, they come around for a couple of things. There are routes you could skip going through the middle of this flower by going around it by grinding on that vine. But you have to, again, hit the vine when you jump, which is not exactly something I like doing, coming off of Rail Canyon. Okay, so, second off, Shadow has a few hints every now and then throughout the story that he knows who he is. A Shadow android would not need to be would not need to know that he's Shadow the Hedgehog. He would not even suggest the idea, because that's not his purpose. And some people could say, well, Omega attacked Shadow at the beginning of the story, and he's programmed to attack Eggman, or he wanted to attack Eggman robots. But you'll notice that Omega really doesn't put up much of a fight against Shadow. Instead, he does more damage to all the Eggman tech on the walls before Rouge breaks up that battle. So the Shadow could be a robot storyline. Doesn't really go anywhere, and it doesn't get resolved definitively in this game. So, I'm not really... And I think it kind of... it lessens the impact of Shadow's character. Because all of a sudden you could be in charge of a clone. Who really wants to be in charge of a clone? Instead of being in charge of the character that you would have played through at least 4 levels of Sonic Adventure 2 and defeated the Bio-Lizard with, and actually followed through a character arc. So that's the first thing, and that's the one that, everybody sort of notices in that part of the storyline. Is Shadow an android? Is he not? And we all know that deep down he's not. And there are clues in this game that say he's not, that should be obvious to him. But, he's kind of on the amnesia side of things after his fall to Earth from Adventure 2. So, you gotta give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Just understand that the whole reason that Rouge sets Shadow free from Eggman's base is so that Metal Sonic can catch up with the group and then manipulate Shadow's, or copy Shadow's powers onto himself. Another clue that Shadow's not an android, because there's no reason to suppose that Dr. Robotnik would have been able to replicate any of Shadow's powers, which are all derived, as we find out in the next game, from his alien blood. More so than, anything you could mechanically produce. And yes, that also means that Metal Sonic has no interest in Rouge or Omega. In fact, it's not really certain what Metal Sonic's angle toward Omega is, and I'll get back to that in a second. Rouge was only a tool for getting Shadow set free. She was a skilled government agent. She could get into an area where she wasn't supposed to be, and once she discovered Shadow, of course, she would then free him as we finish the Frog Forest level. And in this case, the levels do play to form. We're going to finish with a nice, I think, B rank here. And then we're going to go to Lost Jungle. And while Lost Jungle has its own frogs, it's also got a couple of very nasty pitfalls in it. And you can get through most of Lost Jungle and think you're doing okay, and then get to the ending sequence and lose, all your lives trying to make that work. And not because you're doing anything wrong, but because the game's engine wasn't quite able to handle the end of this level. So again, Metal Sonic doesn't have any use for Rouge. He doesn't need to copy her data or anything like that. It was just a tool. She was just a tool for him to get access to Shadow. Now you could ask, why would Metal Sonic need Rouge to get access to Shadow instead of just visiting one of Dr. Robotnik's mini laboratories himself? Well, it's possible that Metal Sonic didn't exactly know where. Well, okay, it's possible that Metal Sonic needed to be in the central, in Eggman's central location, and he couldn't really get Shadow free from his location, or he just Metal Sonic might just be lazy. Something that I think makes less sense. But I'm trying to make sense of why Metal Sonic would manipulate Rouge for this, and you can see I'm running into a little bit of trouble sort of understanding that. Well, you met the other frogs, the frogs of this stage. The dart frogs are colored like poison dart frogs. Those frogs kill plant life through acid rain or poison rain, which doesn't make a lot of sense considering that the forest isn't dead. But, let's let it go.
There's that black frog again.
But, I'm pretty certain that story-wise it makes sense for Metal Sonic to have been the one to contact Rouge in order to liberate Shadow. The only other option is that Dr. Eggman would have contacted Rouge in an attempt to keep Shadow away from Metal Sonic, who at this point would have already turned against Eggman. And maybe that makes more sense. Since we do know that Eggman was able to contact the Chaotix to get them to try to free him, perhaps he made more than one phone call from his trapped location.
Up to you, Rouge.
Then there's the question of Omega.
Doesn't look like we'll be able to move on.
No problem. Let's get moving.
Omega blames Dr. Eggman for his imprisonment
Naturally.
in the area where Shadow is being stored. And there's no reason that's ever given in this story for why Omega would be kept there. Is there no reason given in this story for why Omega would be kept there?
I'm sensing something.
I mean, there's some speculation that maybe
I'll take it from here.
Omega was supposed to guard Shadow. I guess that's possible. But Omega certainly didn't like being down there, which suggests that it wasn't a duty worthy of his talents, such as Omega, understood his talents. What I'm trying to do here is I'm purposely trying to avoid activating the frogs, so those fruits don't run around the stage. Not that they're terribly hard to avoid, but just showing you can do that. So, Omega blames Dr. Eggman for, putting him aside for whatever reasons. And it's interesting because at the beginning because very early on in the story, we're not dealing with Dr. Eggman. We're dealing with Metal Sonic pretending to be Dr. Eggman, which has a very interesting problem for Omega. We don't know how long Metal Sonic has been pretending to be Dr. Eggman. And we don't know how long Omega was put into the bunker where Shadow is. So it's possible that it wasn't Dr. Eggman who put him in that bunker at all, but Metal Sonic. Now, why would Metal Sonic put Omega in that bunker? That becomes That becomes a little more problematic. Meaning because he would sort of get in the way.
Looks like this one's for me.
Naturally. It's just sort of funny to think of the fact that Omega has such hatred toward Dr. Eggman, and it might not have been Dr. Eggman who put him in that bunker. But now that I think about it, and now that I've talked through it a little bit, I think I like my Eggman Contacts Rouge theory better than I like my Metal Sonic Contacts Rouge theory. And so, if that's the case, and if you remember in the first boss battle, Eggman, who is Metal Sonic in disguise, clearly has never seen, makes noises as if he's never seen Omega before. So I think that it does make more sense that yes, Omega's issues with Dr. Eggman are properly founded. That Dr. Eggman is the one that put Omega in the bunker. For whatever reason, either because he was developing the E-1000 robots, or he was trying to guard Shadow, or who knows. But I think that I was going to suggest that perhaps Omega's animus towards the Doctor was misplaced. I don't think it is now. I think that the Doctor is the one who put Omega in the bunker. And I think that Dr. Eggman is the one who told Rouge where the bunker was, although he described it as, of course, some sort of treasure trove. Because who else would know where that bunker is besides him and possibly Metal Sonic? So what Eggman was trying to do then was he was trying to prevent Metal Sonic from having access to Shadow. Omega was just sort of was just sort of added on, which, fits in with his character. He's a replacement character. He's there because Team Dark originally included Dr. Eggman. Okay, so to summarize, what I think that cutscene tells us, or where I think the story has taken us so far. Clearly, Metal Sonic had wanted to absorb certain characters for their abilities. If you play through the stories, if you play through the relevant stories, he wants Shadow's powers. I think that's fairly obvious. He also took Froggy from Big the Cat because Froggy had been exposed to chaos, and so somehow that might have given him some sort of information about chaos powers. He also stole a Chow, in this case, Chocolate Chow, because, other than the fact that we just love Chao, you know, Chao are also related to Chaos. I'll also point out that Chao have the abilities to take on the appearance and qualities of things that they absorb. Alright, let me break from that thought for a second here. We're about to get to the hard part of this stage. Now, what you have to do is you have to swing from vine to vine, and when the vine reaches the top, you move on to the next one. I recommend doing this with the flight character, because if you mess up, you have maybe half a chance that you can get back to make it work. The hardest part of this is not the gator. The hardest part of this is the slowdown the gator causes. Because it can cause you to miss a vine, or lose your rhythm with the vines, and that can cause you to plummet to your death. But if you get to the end of it, you just need to run by these rain frogs and get to the goal ring. And we're going to get a big fat E rank here because I died a couple times in the crocodile fight.
I'm ashamed to call myself a treasure hunter.
The final thing that Metal Sonic wanted is revenge on Sonic. So he also sent the challenge to Sonic to make sure that he would be there to fight Metal Sonic when Metal Sonic had collected all the powers that he needed. And that brings us to our character battle here, where Team Dark and Team Sonic run into each other. Now this battle, again, another proof that Shadow should realize he's not a robot because he actually has memories of Sonic and some feeling of rivalry toward him, something that you wouldn't necessarily program into a robot. But here, the normal strategy I use of just using the tornado attack kind of interferes with the battlefield. You've kind of got these 4 pillars marked around here. And so I start off doing my thing, but I keep running into the pillars. I get rid of Sonic, so that leaves Tails and Knuckles. Unfortunately, you know, I think I run into Knuckles. Fortunately, Knuckles only knocks out Shadow, and so I'm able to keep Rouge and Thundershoot Omega to finish this off. But it does prevent me from getting an A rank.
Sorry, but no.
And that will lead us to the creepier portion of the Sonic Heroes playthrough, and I'll see you then.